Okay, sorry for the slightly late start. Welcome to the Exec Scrutiny Board on the 10th of November. Any apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Lindsay.
Okay, thank you. Late items, I have a couple of addendums for item 8 and item 9 in regards to climate change implications, so I hope you've got those as well, just 2 sheets there. Item 3, declarations of interest. I understand, Councillor Eyre?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I probably don't need to declare this one, but I always think it's best to declare it anyway. The local plan makes quite a lot of reference to Derby railway station, and I work for East Midlands Railway, who of course would benefit from that being upgraded. I don't intend to talk on that and don't think there's any reason not to partake in the discussions around the local plan, but just thought I'd make that noted.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre, and that proves you actually read it as well, which is good going there because it goes to Cabinet soon. Okay, moving on then. Minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of October 2025 attached. Are there any notes, any issues with that? No? Noted.
Chair, can I just say I think the action on the forward plan about referring the community safety partnership item that is on the community scrutiny agenda, that minute extract for Monday the 17th of November. So.
Thank you, noted. Okay, so item 5 is the forward plan. Okay, so this is our opportunity to have a look. If we feel we want to bring any of these items for more scrutiny here, we can do if you wanted to raise that. And also if we wanted to invite the relevant cabinet member along, that's something that is a standing thing that we can do here. If you wanted to do that for any of those, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on to item 6, which is the overview and scrutiny forward plan. It's the same deal, really. We can recommend to the overview and scrutiny boards if we wish them to take a closer look at any particular topic or item. And we can also, if we wanted to, bring something to ourselves as well. So if you want to have a look at that, if there's anything that you believe we should be looking more at, or we want to recommend anything to those overview and scrutiny boards, then let me know. Okay. No problem. Okay, so on to item 7. That is the recommendations to Council Cabinet. We weren't very successful, I don't think. If we have a look at, I believe all 3 were rejected. So, yeah, it is what it is. Obviously, when we put forward recommendations, we try and be objective, and unless it's something which is within the remit of the recommendations, it can be challenging sometimes. So I suppose it's to be noted, really, that if we are going to put recommendations forward, and I wouldn't discourage any recommendation from the floor, all are valid if they get seconded and we agree them. But just bearing in mind, if it's something which obviously is going to significantly alter what the Cabinet are actually considering, then probably the likelihood that it will be noted or rejected. But that's the way of the world, unfortunately. But yes, this time all 3 were. So, okay. Next item is Council Cabinet Agenda, and it's a bumper one because the local plan is in here. So we'll skip through to item 8, which is Emergency Accommodation Framework, Procurement and Compliance. Who's going to pick that up? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Ian Fulliger, Director of Housing and Regulatory Services. So members will be aware that when people approach the council as homeless, and where we have a duty to house them, often we have to house them in bed and breakfast or other forms of emergency accommodation. Since 2021, the numbers of people that we've housed in bed and breakfast and temporary accommodation have increased significantly from something of just over 100 in 2021 through to 462 in 24-25, Chair. That's not because there's been a massive increase in people approaching the council as being homeless. it reflects the significant reduction in turnover of the stock that the council has available to it to place people who require affordable housing. Our current framework for the provision of bed and breakfast and emergency accommodation is outdated, and it is about to expire, Chair, and therefore this report is seeking authority for the council to procure a new framework, and it's hoped that that framework should be in place by April of next year. The framework's significant in terms of value. The council's currently spending in the order of £8 million a year in this service area, so the value of the new framework could potentially be in the order of £64 million, but obviously we are projecting forward, Chair, and this has been quite a volatile area, as I was saying, in recent years, so it is hard to predict the value of this with any certainty. The majority of this spend relates to housing services, as I've been saying, but a small element, about £375,000 a year, will be used by children's services or early help services, Chair, and so it's going to be a jointly procured framework between housing and social care. Soft market testing that has been conducted so far suggests that there is strong interest amongst small and medium providers in the area, Chair, and so we have a high level of confidence that the procurement that we're going to undertake should be successful, Chair. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
So the first question I have then is, so we're talking about projections, so obviously it's volatile. I'm assuming what you mean by that is that the costs can go up rather than go down. But that would be a solid assumption.
It is very hard to say, Chair, because we are putting in place a number of initiatives. You'll be aware of the Abbey Lodge scheme. You'll be aware a couple of committees ago we got authority to do a private sector leasing scheme, and both of those schemes will begin to influence the market and drive costs down. And indeed, when we started on the Abbey Lodge initiative, when we placed a household into bed and breakfast, we assumed if it was to stay in bed and breakfast or TA, it would cost £26,000 if they were to stay in that accommodation for the year. Well, already on the back of the work that's been done so far, that cost has fallen to £19,000. So the work that we're doing is having an impact, and if those projects continue to be successful, you might suppose that £64 million might reduce. However, obviously, there's a much wider housing market at play here, and I wouldn't want to presuppose that the costs will necessarily definitely go down.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's obviously, that shows that work is underway to actually reduce costs if possible, and obviously the work outside of this focus could deliver that, but there's no guarantees, I think is what I was looking for. Councillor Kerr.
I was wondering about the reasoning for the 8 years. It seems quite a long time, particularly as we're running into local government reorganisation, and the authorities around us are also housing authorities, and we could be expecting them to be having these sorts of duties. So I want to know whether there had been any, the reason for the 8 years, and whether there have been discussions with those partners across our borders.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Very valid point. Ian?
Yeah, it's a good question, Chair. It's we've taken procurement advice in relation to this, Chair, and the advice is that if we can make this longer-term procurement, it will be more attractive to the private sector partners out there, and it's therefore that we're more likely to get a stronger response from the market, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr, is that sufficient answer, or would you like to follow up?
I'd still like to know whether we've talked to our neighbours across the border and whether they're doing anything like this as well.
Yeah, okay. Ian?
We are in regular discussions now with those authorities within our housing market area, Chair. I must admit, I'm not party to that, those discussions, so I can't answer the question whether they're doing something similar. I can certainly respond back to yourselves, Chair, outside of the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Can I just suggest that maybe those are some questions that might be asked before the Cabinet meeting in 2 days' time?
In terms of officers' responses to that, you mean?
In terms of the officer information.
If that's possible, Ian, could you forward that to members?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, contributions? Councillor Bonson and then Councillor Wright.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, given what Ian's told us about the 8-year sort of lock-in being more attractive to the private sector market, my concern is, given recent media reports and what have you about the standards that residents experience in some of these housing provisions, what assurance can we have to ensure that there are decent standards? What checks and measures are put in place to check that these places are decent homes?
Thank you. And that's obviously not just at the beginning of the contract. Obviously, the point is that it needs to be regularly checked to keep it a high-quality provision.
Yeah, Chair, and absolutely, and this is one of the drivers behind us taking this piece of work forward. We recognise that with the previous contract, we weren't quite as strong as we might be in terms of, it's your point, Chair, going back and inspecting midway through the contract and ensuring that the standards in the accommodation is as we would want it to be, Chair. So that will be a fundamental part of this contract.
Thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Wright, then, I'm assuming that the relevant overview and scrutiny boards or committees, as in there may be more than one, financial and other, do they actually have reports do you recall taking a report, interim or updates every year to the relevant boards or committees? How does it get scrutinised along the way?
I don't believe that we do take those sorts of updates to scrutiny committees, Chair. It would be done at an officer level with an inspection if required to ensure the standards are still there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, can I just have a bit more clarity around paragraph 4.11, because I think this goes to the heart of this matter. The cost has gone from 0.6 million to 8.1 million in a few years' time, and you say that's because of lack of turnover. Is that because we've got a constant demand and the supply has reduced, which has forced up the price? Or is it because lack of alternative accommodation through, for example, Derby Homes? We're not getting the turnover rate within our social housing scheme. And if it's the latter, is this something that Derby Homes are aware of and are trying to put policies in place to actually encourage a more appropriate turnover accommodation, for example, for elderly people in larger accommodations, alternative provision, that sort of thing?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Absolutely, it is the second, wider than just the second scenario, Chair, in that it's not only Derby Homes' managed accommodation that has reduced in turnover, it's all housing association stock turnover has reduced across the city. So it's reduced that available to us. And just like the vast majority of other cities of our size, Chair, landlords have been able to take advantage of that within the market and charge us highly inflated prices compared to what was, say, charged 5 years ago. So it's that double whammy, if I can say, Chair, of having to use the private sector more often, and then when we do use them, they're charging us a significantly higher price than what they would have done 4 or 5 years ago, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bonser.
Sorry, can I just come back on that then? Given what we've just been told and I mean what we know about the nature of some of the private landlords, are there any further plans to open further provisions such as Abbey Lodge? Is there anything else in the pipeline?
Yeah, we're working all the time to increase the supply of our accommodation. Last financial year across the city, so it's not just the council and Derby Homes, but with housing association partners as well, we did 249 new or acquired homes, and that's the biggest that I can remember, Chair. So certainly the biggest for 10 years that we've done in the city, and our plans are to keep pushing in terms of the accommodation that we buy and build ourselves, and then, as I was saying, obviously to buy or build a house, certainly to build it can be a couple of years, so we recognise the need for us to rent accommodation that we can do much, much quicker than that, and we have now authority to take forward a private sector leasing scheme as well, Chair, that should deliver properties much more quickly as well.
Well, that's good news. Any other questions, queries? Okay, do we have any recommendations at all, or we just note this one? Are we okay with that? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ian. Moving on then to item 9, which is, if I can find it, delegation to approve affordable housing schemes. Karen.
Thank you, Chair. This report actually seeks approval for a delegation for approval of affordable housing schemes. We are seeking delegation to the Strategic Director of Place in consultation with the Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer, along with the Cabinet Member for Housing, Property and Regulatory Services for a period of 3 years. That would actually approve expenditure on each affordable housing acquisition or development up to a sum of 3 million. It would also allow for cost variations over 0.3 million and up to 0.5 million, as long as it's contained within the current programme. It would also allow for approval to change the HRA capital programme as required for addition of new projects that's coming forward, and also to enter into all the necessary agreements required, such as procurement and the contracts with developers. It would also allow us for the developments and acquisitions to be incorporated within the council's housing stock and to be managed by Derby Homes. We would also report back to Cabinet following a review of the delegation before the expiry of the 3-year period, and also to approve the updated HRA board terms of reference, which is actually attached at Appendix A. Cabinet may remember that some time ago we did actually bring this delegation in. We trialled it for 1 year and we then sought it to be extended for 3 years, and we're now seeking the renewal of the delegation. The change is actually slightly on some of the approvals and the level of expenditure. So previously it was 2.5 million and we are seeking for 3 million. And again, with the cost variations, they have increased slightly. That actually reflects the fact that the delegation was 4 years old, and obviously in that time there has been significant cost increases within the construction industry. All projects above 3 million would still come to Cabinet, and we would seek approval in the standard way for that. We have actually gone through, and we do feel that it has been a successful delegation and it has streamlined the process for us to be able to deliver more affordable housing schemes. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Kerr.
I think this is a good news story. I think it's something that was tested, it was piloted, it's gone forward, and I think it's shown that it's a scheme that is working. Where I think we just fall up, and I think a little bit more work is needed, is in terms of the information from the council. The council is actually doing this and it's making a difference. So at the moment, under public stakeholder engagement, we've got the HRA Capital Board and the Cabinet Member we've got ward councillors, but we haven't got anything that would bring this information that something is happening into the public domain. And I think there should be a little bit of, could be a bit of thought given as to how we ensure that something like this, which is a significant spend, but it's a sensible, significant spend, helping solve a significant problem, how we make that publicly available so that people can be reassured that money is being spent in a way that is going to make a difference to people. So, maybe, I don't know, it shouldn't have to go back through a cabinet member process, or maybe as a formal thing, but maybe there can be some expectation that a statement is made, or the information can be found somewhere.
Okay, so it's a fair point. So 3 years, each affordable housing acquisition or development up to 3 million. So obviously that can add up over the period of 3 years. And Councillor Kerr's point is absolutely valid. So how do we just know about those decisions, really? I know that it will be recorded, it will be in minutes or noted in the actual decision itself, but what's the mechanism there for us to actually learn about the various decisions along the way once they're delegated? Because they won't then, as Councillor Kerr says, they won't go through Cabinet for a decision, so it won't come through this Exec Scrutiny Board, so we wouldn't see it.
What we do is throughout the period, we do actually attend other boards, and they are also shown in the HRA Capital Programme, and we would present at boards on what we are doing and how we are delivering on the individual projects. So it becomes part of the wider picture. What we don't actually do is specifically have something somewhere where we would go into the public domain. It's through those boards that we release the information, and then, like I say, through ward councillors being given this is what's happening in your ward, and this is the progress that's being made on it.
Okay, Councillor Rawson and Councillor Kerr.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it would be a good idea to try and do a bit of promotion around this, and part of the issue would be getting the media interested in a report that says the council has bought one property, for example. But maybe if officers could work with comms once families moved into one of the properties and give it a bit of a human interest story, that would perhaps find some wider interest within the local media and help us promote this particular scheme.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if I cast my mind back before this delegation, the one that I'm most aware of was the Hackwood acquisition a few years ago now, but that delivered really good positive sort of, I think it was bungalows with mobility in mind as well. So it was a really positive story, and it did get into the press, and it did get some coverage, quite rightly. But that was because it went through the cabinet, so it was more high profile. So Councillor Rawson's point, I think it would be a real positive thing if we could look at that. Before you comment on that, Councillor Kerr.
I fully agree that to put publicity into this would be good, and that sort of human interest could be a way of doing it. But I think it would be good to have a mechanism which is not just a freedom of information request, because at present it would be a freedom of information request, and they are all a pain to do because of the deadlines and so on. Can I suggest a recommendation for Cabinet and officers to identify a way to make the use of this delegation public knowledge without the need for a freedom of information request, and leave it up for them to solve? Yeah.
Sorry, I've forgotten what it was you were going to respond to now.
Sorry, it was in relation to the publicity events. So we are in regular contact with our comms colleagues, and they actually have a programme of delivery. And as we're coming up to completion of a project, they will contact us to make sure whether it's delayed. So the last one that we did was the 6 properties on Brentford Drive in Mackworth, because they were a lower value because of it only being 6. So we do look at any opportunities, and I think Tony has also identified that we do.
Yes, Chair. So in terms of reporting back to members, the quarterly financial report that Tony Nash is going to be presenting to members shortly, that does capture these decisions that are made at a delegated level, Chair. So yourselves will get to see that information, albeit it will be within the wider report that Tony presents quarterly.
Thank you. I think I'd like to welcome the report and the vital affordable housing that it will deliver over the next 3 years. So if I have a seconder for that to be sent as a... Yeah, Councillor Kerr, thank you. We all agreed with that? Alongside, obviously, Councillor Kerr's recommendation as well. That's okay. Right, okay. What have we got next? We'll move on to item 10, which is financial monitoring. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Tony Nash, Head of Finance. So this report outlines a summary of the Council's Q2 forecast financial position. The Q2 forecast revenue position for Derby is £526,000 overspent. And for context, this is less than 1% of the £350 million revenue budget of the Council. This overspend, although a minor pressure, is a result of setting a robust budget in February which recognised the pressures facing the Council, and this was circa £40 million, invested into essential services in the February budget. This pressure of £526,000 is being reviewed to establish mitigations to enable either minor or no drawdown from reserves at the outturn in March. The main changes from Q1 to Q2 are outlined in section 4.1.6 of the report. And the main pressures that have materialised this quarter are 2.3 million for adult social care, and this is increased numbers and increased care costs, and 1.116 million for increased numbers of children in care. These emerging pressures have been mitigated in the main from council-wide underspends. For details of the main variances to the budget set and the changes since Q1, please look at Appendix 5, which gives numbers and detailed narratives. Earmark reserves are outlined in Appendix 1, with the main reserve, the General Fund Reserve, having a 15.8 million balance, which is positive. All of the savings agreed in the February budget are forecast to be delivered at Q2, and a new table has been added at Appendix 7 to show the reader the individual savings that make up the totals. For capital, there is a forecast variance of £46,000 against the original approved budget of 177.6 million. Section 4.3.6 of the report outlines all the main variants from the budget setting process, and Appendix 2 outlines the main changes Cabinet are asked to approve this quarter, with Appendix 3 showing all other changes requiring approval. This capital section also requests approval for the addition of a new scheme to the capital programme of 3 million for Merrill Way, A514 Bolton Lane Junction. And this is profiled 1.6 million in 25-26 and 1.4 in 26-27. And this is a scheme funded from the EMCA grant, and the details are outlined in section 4.3.10. There's also an addition of a new vehicle scheme to the capital programme of 242,000 for street cleansing vehicles funded from Derby Homes, and this is outlined in 4.3.14. And finally, there's an approval to recommend to Council the update to the Council's capital strategy, and that's outlined in 4.3.17. On the HRA, there's nothing significant to report, as at Q2 it's forecast on target to contribute 1.369 million to the reserve for business as usual activities. The report outlines the DSG grant for Derby. This is split into 4 blocks, which you all know: the schools block, early years and high needs, and the central schools reserve services block. In summary, the budget set for 25-26 reported a forecast in-year deficit of 6.56 million. resulting in a cumulative deficit of 21.311 million. The forecast position at Q2 has increased this by 1.235 million to 7.795 million. Section 4.6.12 of the report shows the changes, and this is mainly in the high needs expenditure from a budgeted position, which is the main driver for the increase. The government's extension of the DSG statutory override has now been extended to April 28, affording the short-term financial flexibility needed for authorities to implement changes to this. And this is going to be underpinned and reinforced by the government's longer-term reforms. The deficits for DSG are not held on the Council's balance sheet, they're held nationally, and we are awaiting further information on proposals around that. Finally, the Council tax bill for 25-26 was 164.268 million, of which 88.6 has been collected, that's 53.71%, and business rates for 25-26 was 104 million, of which 59.055 or 56.24% has been collected. Both show a slight improvement in collection percentage for the same period last year. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Can I just start by 4.612, where you've got the forecast deficit and it's increased from, well, Q2 now it's 7.6. Where do we think we're going to be, and what are the plans at this stage to actually deal with that in layman's terms, really? I mean, how is that going to be dealt with?
There is a deficit management plan that is on, I can circulate to you, so there is a plan that is updated, but in a nutshell as well, we're waiting for advice from the central government on how this is going to be taken forward. We just don't know. But we have got a plan to bring it into balance.
Is there an expectation that the central government may provide funding, or do you think that the council is going to have to deal with it on their own?
In all honesty, I don't know. I mean, you can speak to some people that say it could potentially be written off, and you know, you can speak to us that say it needs to be funded. I honestly don't know, but I can ask for something to be sent round from that service.
That's fine. It was just what the feeling of officers are. It's not trying to box you into a corner, but it's an issue that needs to be resolved one way or another, isn't it? Any question, Councillor Kerr?
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue, and it's not just us, it's across the country. I've got several questions. Some of them I think are simple and some of them maybe more challenging. The Derby Homes street cleansing vehicles, I just wondered if they had any at the moment, and if not, whether this would be a new development for them, and whether we are absolutely sure that we can spend HRA funding, or if it's Derby Homes funded, which won't be different, but if it's HRA funding on street cleansing vehicles. The second question is that there's quite a lot of spending on sustainable travel on the capital side, which doesn't seem to have got spent and disproportionately. And I just wondered why we're not managing to deliver on the sustainable travel investment. In 4.6.9, it talks about the clawback, and I think this could be quite interesting, on the early years spend. And it appears that there have been either fewer young people turning up to take up these places, or we misjudge the number of young people who might want, that there are in the society. And if we've got young people not turning up, do we know if there are any, if this is an early sign of implications for maybe vulnerable families who haven't got the resources to get their kids to school, to those early years experiences, or whether we ought to be thinking about additional support for families in that situation, and whether whether that sort of issue are being picked up and explored by CYP colleagues. There's reference to an element 3 spend, maintained element 3. It comes into both one of the paragraphs and it's in the table on 4.612. I don't know what it is. I wonder if that could be explained. Again, in Appendix 3, there's references to only £100,000 spent on energy projects, but...
Sorry, Councillor Kerr, I think we probably need to pause and deal with some of these because I've lost count.
I've only got 2 more.
All right, well, we might have to go back and just do them one by one because it's not fair on the officers to give them...
I think that Tony will say some of these we'll get answers to.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to remember that we haven't got service leads across...
Absolutely, Chair. So on Appendix 3, there's energy projects, £100,000 on energy projects, of which 90,000 isn't being spent. So that sounds a bit worrying to our estates. And finally, there's a 4% increase in spending on people with mental health, and I think that's between Q1 and Q2. And a 4% increase in a quarter on mental health should, again, I think, be flagging alarm bells. Ringing alarm bells, and I wondered if there was any more story about that. That's page 35.
So if we just deal with that one first, because is that a case, do you know, of inflationary pressures or similar, or is it increased provision? You know, because there could be two or a mixture of both of those, I suppose. Do we have any insight into that?
I'm just a bit confused where all these are coming from. I presume the 4% is from the revenue monitoring appendix.
We can work backwards if you like.
Yeah, we'll work backwards. I've got the notes. I mean, most of these I will get you some fuller answers for.
Okay, so if you haven't got an insight into that...
Yeah, that's actually more clients, but I'll get you a fuller answer on that one.
Okay.
So the energy projects, was that part of the revenue monitoring as well? If you just give me some page numbers, Councillor Kerr, then I'll be able to pinpoint it better and get you some fuller answers. Page 35. Oh, it's capital, right, yeah. Yeah, I'll have to take that back to officers. Element 3, I know what you mean, I know where the table is, so I can get you a fuller answer on that one. Sustainable travel, no, I don't know why. The only one I do know of that list is your Derby Homes one, and they have got some, we've done this for them before, and they give us the funding, and we procure them for them because it's value for money for us to do that.
Thank you. Did we cover the 4.612 item? I wrote that down. Has that been... Okay. Good. Are there any other questions, queries, comments on that? Councillor Wright.
No, it's just a thank you. I had a number of questions, which Tony answered all of them prior to the meeting, and it makes my life a lot easier. Thank you very much.
That's a fair point as well. If you do have any questions, and if you could CC the other members in, that would be really good as well. That way we get... I mean, I know you did. That's fantastic. But yeah, it's a lot of detail. But if you can take those back and then let us... Can send it to all of us? Would that be okay? Thank you very much. Any more for any more? Okay. We have the small item of the... Derby draft plan. Now, this is long. We've been waiting a long time for this. So over to you, Paul, to introduce it in what will probably only take you a couple of minutes, I would imagine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just hoping Councillor Kerr hasn't been through all 350 pages of it with question. Thank you. Cabinet report. This is seeking recommendation from Cabinet, recommended to Cabinet to go out to public consultation. This will be the first time that we go out to public stakeholders to engage on what is the draft version of the local plan. We've been hard at work, as you know, Chair, this over many years. We've involved cross-party working group and planning committee members during its gestation period. This is the first time we go outside of the council. Plan contains housing needs, how much, where and what type, employment and economic development, future Derby City Centre, I think we're all keen on that, and how to conserve and enhance our historic environment, amongst many, many other things such as transport, environmental protection, climate change, and a suite of development management policies which we would use to determine planning applications. There's a great deal of detail in there. We need to find some 18,000 new homes in the city. We have agreed with our neighbours, Amber Valley and South Derbyshire, that we could accommodate 12,500. They accommodate the remainder. The 12,500, this plan effectively says 12,500 houses. This is where we think the sites are suitable for that growth to go. And we are consulting on that. The report to Cabinet is written in a headline style, so it's got the key bullet points that people will be interested in. And I say, all being well, we will go out to consultation in January for 8 weeks, of which there are 2 public stakeholder events in the Audish Room in the Marketplace on the end of January and one at the end of February. They're Saturdays, all day, for members of the public to drop in and clarify, amongst other events that we're organising during the publication period. Publication period ends in March, and then we go through and sift all those consultee responses to come back with what's known as a Regulation 19 submission, which will need full council approval to be submitted off to the Secretary of State, our deadline. Everybody's deadline, the planning authorities around the country, the deadline is December 26. We all need to get our plans to the inspectorate by then. And then we wait for the inspectorate to come back, and I'm hoping in here we'd have a public inquiry and examination into our local plan, looking at the fors and against, and coming out of it sometime in 27, later 28, with an approved adoptable plan. Well, this is the very, very earliest stage to get that plan out there. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Paul. With my exec board hat on, obviously still absorbing the draft, which Cabinet are going to assumingly agree to move forward to public consultation. So, I mean, there are, obviously, I take huge interest in this, along with many other members of the council, and I have my own opinions, and I'm developing those. And obviously I'll be able to contribute like everybody else to the process, and I will look forward to that, because there are elements in here that I've got a big issue with, but that's not necessarily for me to debate tonight as Exec Scrutiny Board. We're here to look at the report as going to Cabinet. So just to reiterate though, that how vital it is for councillors and residents and everybody within the community, businesses, etc., to contribute, consider and put forward views, concerns, comments, because is it my understanding, Paul, that as we move through that first public consultation and move towards Reg 19, that every single submission will be part of that submission process? So does the inspectorate obviously have a look at that as well, alongside what the council is submitting? They will also take into account every single comment, every single concern, supportive comment, objections, whatever it is, that will all be within the submission.
The Regulation 19 would have its roots in the responses received. The Regulation 19, if members of the public and councillors respond to the Regulation 19, that letter doesn't come to the planning department, it goes direct to the inspector. So the inspector sees all those responses to the regulation, the next stage, not necessarily to this stage, but we have to summarise those and provide a reason, justification of why we're doing this. Yes, we take that on board, why we're not doing that, and so on and so forth for this consultation. But the Reg 19 is the one that the inspector sees, because if you write in response to the Regulation 19, you'll be effectively writing to the inspector to consider those direct.
And of course, that is where, well, let's just roll back. So obviously this first consultation is to receive broad comments, broad issues, suggestions, etc. And then the Reg 19, once all of that's been put into place, the council will then publish a final plan that is going to be submitted. And at that point, I think the wording is that it needs to be, any comments or further objections need to be based on legal grounds and planning, specific national planning policy and those kind of things, rather than just general comments. Is that a fair assessment, or is Reg 19 still an opportunity to have more broader comments sort of submitted?
Having attended the Amber Valley examination last year, it seems like last year, members of the public and their comments were still being taken into account by the inspector. But you would normally expect a lot of responses at this stage, and they would be either taken into account or not. And if people are persistent and really form a view that that is not right, that would then be put forward by the objectors or the supporters through the Reg 19 to go in front of the inspector.
So what we're saying here is that if you really want to try to form or steer the council's local plan, the forthcoming, assuming Cabinet agree this, the chance for that, the real opportunity for that is during this first consultation, because then all of those comments hopefully will be taken on board. Maybe you'll have to steer and advise the council into publishing the Reg 19, and that's a very advanced stage where it's probably a lot harder to necessarily steer the draft plan. Well, not, it won't be draft anymore, it'll be the plan. So it's really vital, really, this first steps to actually get everybody to engage the whole city and councillors to really put forward what they'd like the plan to be, and make comments if they're not happy or if they're supportive of any particular aspect. Make sure you contribute to the process.
Absolutely, Chair. Now's the time to get engaged. Yes.
Councillor Bonser, Councillor Kerr, and then Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment, really, that in terms of the progress of the local plan through the system and the consultation process, whether it would be a good idea, I mean, it's not necessarily a recommendation to Cabinet, but to consider further briefings to councillors so that they fully understand where their opportunities for input are and what the process is, because I'm not entirely, I mean, if we're involved in planning, then we might have better insight, but to ensure that all councillors are fully aware of every opportunity to contribute.
So, Paul, are you planning on taking this to one of our sort of training nights or one of the councillor briefings to just run through this? I mean, obviously, the Cabinet will be, assuming they'll be agreeing this in the next few days. So, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely right. As you know, Chair, we have cross-party working group, which is a small select few. We have planning committee member training. I think this is crying out for cross-member one evening session where we all sit down and me and other officers are available and we can answer questions that get into the drill down into the nitty-gritty, if you like, because it's a huge document and you cannot cover it in one question and answer session. As we progress, I think we need to bring everybody along that journey with us.
Thank you. I did make this point, Councillor Bonser, in my involvement, not so much more recently, but fairly early on, once it got to the point where officers were potentially considering sites to be brought forward or considerations on green spaces, I did make the point many times to say you've got to make sure we take all of the councillors along with us, because sometimes in the room that I was aware of, there may have only been 2 or 3 councillors and maybe the Cabinet member, and obviously I didn't believe that that was a wider cohort. For some things it is if it's a working party, but you're absolutely right. Now is the time, Paul, to actually sort of engage with the whole of the council to ensure that we're all aware and they actually sit down and take time. I'm sure they will, but take time and sit down and read through the local plan, especially in terms of sites that may be near their ward, so they're fully aware of those, and all the other things which could impact their communities. So absolutely support that, Councillor Bonser, and as soon as possible if we can do that, Paul.
Through you, Chair, I think between now and Christmas, before the consultation goes out in January, that's the ideal time to bring members up to speed. So yes, leave that with me, I'll take that away.
Thank you very much. I think it was Councillor Kerr, Councillor Wright, Councillor Eyre. Did I get that right? Yep.
Thank you, and I very much support the idea of further councillor involvement. And I think just to emphasise that the consultation isn't starting now, the consultation is going to be starting after Christmas. So after Christmas is when people need to get their thinking caps on and their reading glasses if they need them. Can I just say, I really appreciated the working parties and the discussions and being presented with bits of this document in sort of much more bite-sized, themed slices. And I think that process worked well. So when we are starting this process again for probably our new local authority, I think that is something that we should offer that new cohort of councillors that they might want to get involved in, and maybe a way that could be used again. What we have now gives us the opportunity, though, to look holistically at the whole thing together, and I haven't done that yet, but I have looked at one or two of the bits that seem to me to be most important. One of those is actually listening to the earlier initial consultation back in 2024, when people could put in their first comments about the sort of principles of Derby's further development. And in 6.6, one of those is highlighted and says, regarding the preferred location of new housing, a clear majority of respondents supported a regeneration-led approach. 83.5% of respondents agreed that new development should be most concentrated in areas requiring renewal, such as the city centre and brownfield sites. Most, 77%, so more than 3/4 of respondents, opposed strategies which prioritised the release of greenfield land, including green wedge and green belt. Now, that is a very significant, I think, proportion of consultees at that early stage, giving a clear direction as to what people in Derby think is important in terms of how we take development forward. And I don't feel that that is reflected in the policies that we currently have regarding housing delivery. So we have policy H1 on housing delivery, and it has G, which is 5 sub-policies. But that principle that people have asked us to deliver for the city is not one of those policies. I don't think we can't write something here now, but I do think it's something that we could show, the consultation when it goes out in January could show that the City Council, the Planning Department, the Cabinet have listened to that priority that is being stated. And we should take that principle forward and incorporate that, if we can, within the document that goes out to consultation. So I've got a suggested wording, Chair, if other people would support that we could ask Cabinet to change this document before it goes out to consultation. And my suggested wording is to ask Cabinet to strengthen the housing principle that came out of the 2024 consultation on the sequential use of land for housing by the introduction of an additional housing policy, that housing development should be regeneration-led, and that green and grey belt and green wedges should consequently gain further protection. This to be included in the Regulation 18 plan consultation and the final wording to be approved by the Chair of Planning and relevant Cabinet member. And I can read that again, it was quite a long sentence.
Yeah. I'm not saying I disagree, but can I just get clarity from Paul? Because doesn't that sit within the actual consultation to form the plan, really? I mean, a question.
Well, my point is, Chair, is that we had the pre-consultation in 2024.
Yeah.
And that made it very clear that people think that we need more housing, but it should be on existing land that has already been developed.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I get that. Paul, what's your comment on that?
This one, Councillor Kerr and I discussed beforehand. Of course, all the housing sites that we are potentially allocating in the draft have to be available, deliverable, and realistic to meet the housing needs. I can't just allocate a site on the expectation it comes forward, because we will lose whatever number is on there, and we'll end up having to allocate a site that's less appropriate to meet the numbers. Saying that, the sites that we are proposing in the plan have been through that sequential approach. I've got to find 12,500 houses somewhere, and we've had a brownfield and city centre approach, first-time approach to get that up and running. We're hoping to deliver somewhere in the region of 5,000 new homes in the city centre, which are going to be on brownfield site, which is likely to be on North Riverside once Our City, Our River is complete. But that still leaves us, well short of our figures. So where else can housing go that is available and deliverable? The whole process, I agree entirely with Councillor Carey in terms of we should be using brownfield first. We shouldn't be going out into the suburbs, out into greenfield sites. But if those sites are not deliverable or available, Reigate Goodyard took an age to come forward. It was bought in the 1970s, and it's only just coming forward now. It wasn't available to be allocated. So we have to have deliverable and available sites. We are just about there with our deliverable and allocated sites. And of course, if all the sites in this draft plan become allocated, they were allocated. So we can't start dictating whether the city centre ones get done first and the greenfield one later on. They will all be available. They'll be allocated in the plan. We have very little other wriggle room on other sites, Chair.
Councillor Kerr, just run the recommendation by me again, please.
Okay. To ask Cabinet to strengthen the housing principle that came out of the 2024 consultation, should I say public consultation, on the sequential use of land for housing. This to be done by the introduction of an additional housing policy stating that housing development should be regeneration-led and that green and grey belt and green wedges should consequently gain further protection. This to be included in the Regulation 18 plan consultation and the final wording to be approved by the Chair of Planning and the relevant Cabinet member.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say I would support Councillor Kerr's recommendation. I actually felt, before discussing it with Lucy, that we should go further. We should take up the recommendation in the report that we defer the local plan based on the implementation of the government legislation, plus the fact that we're likely, by the time the government legislation is finalised, that we'll be into a new authority that will hopefully address some of the issues that I'm certainly most concerned about, and that's building around the periphery. So as an opportunity to take this debate forward, I would support Councillor Kerr's recommendation, but I'd like to base it on real life experience that I've come across. So, for example, our current local plan gives a huge amount of protection to green wedges. Basically, it lists a whole list of circumstances where development can't take place. However, that has been ignored, and arguments around that. Now, listening to when the local plan was set up, it was basically to retain the heritage of Derby as the first public park in the country, to actually make Derby a place where living, the amenities for living included green spaces. I actually think we've got to a tipping point, and it's reflected in the feedback that Lucy's already referred to. It's really strong that the residents of Derby don't want the city to look like what it potentially would look like under the plan. And I've got no doubt that when we go out for consultation in the new year, that feedback will be exactly the same. You know, we regularly survey residents in our part of Chaddiston, and this comes back, protect our green spaces. And we've got very little, whereas local government reorganisation enables us to think much more broadly, and also the currently ineffective consultation procedure that's available under the policy planning framework, where there's a duty to liaise, doesn't work. We've seen that with Spondon Wood. You know, promises around schools. So Wash were going to provide additional spaces for the school in Spondon. The school said we can't physically meet that. We don't want the money because we can't physically take the additional staff. Highways. So they relied on an assessment that the highways in Derby would cope. Our own highways department said the plans were unachievable, undeliverable. Yet it's still got planning permission. Sewerage, you know, another infrastructure issue. That was raised with Wash Borough Council, that the sewage system can't cope with it, and it needed to Wash needed to liaise with the City Council to get sorted. It never happened. So what I'm saying is, you know, despite all these, you know, within the plan and within approvals, supposed protections for infrastructure, etc., it doesn't work. And, you know, with this, you know, I've got a real feeling that with the feedback we've got from the community locally, and that is reinforced by the 2004 surveys, that this is something that the residents of Derby feel extremely strongly about. And I know it's a really difficult challenge because we've got housing targets to meet, and, you know, that's something. But my response to that is, we as a council, I'm not just saying Paul, because, you know, we've got to, you're the one tasked with it, but as a council, we've got to help to actually come up with a way to actually meet those without compromising some of these fundamental issues for the city. So, and I personally would say, I support Lucy's view that we had that consultation in 24. It was very, very clear. And while I recognise we can't respond to everybody's needs, this is overwhelming response. And I suspect, you know, it's not just in my ward that residents feel this way. I think my answer is we've got to be more sophisticated in understanding what residents want and then responding to it. Yeah, and it might mean more work, and it probably would mean more resources to planning, I suspect, to actually do this. But that would be my view. So I'd encourage us as a committee to recommend to Cabinet that we think again, basically.
Okay, it's a very fair point. Councillor Eyre first, then Councillor Bonser, Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kerr and Councillor Wright have summarised quite a bit of what I was going to say, really, and again, fully agree with the amendment, the recommendation, sorry, that's been proposed. I think really looking at this and how it will impact citywide, a lot of opinions are going to be based on how it impacts the area around where somebody is based or the area where somebody represents. From my perspective, I won't claim to be familiar with every single green wedge and every single site that we're looking at placing housing, but I'm certainly familiar with the North Oakwood green wedge site and delighted to see that maintaining its green wedge status in this local plan, especially after the recent planning application that was unanimously rejected at planning. And I imagine everybody who sees a green wedge protected in their area will be having similar views to that, and those that see land not maintaining statuses will not be as pleased. But Councillor Wright touched on a really, really important point there, and actually, Paul, you did as well, in that we mentioned that we've worked very closely with Amber Valley in South Derbyshire. We have another neighbour, and that other neighbour is Wash. And my experience of Wash has been that they couldn't really care less about working with the city. They're very happy to dump housing on the borders of the city. We saw it in Spondon. There are just over 700 houses proposed around the borders of Oakwood Ward, and they actually, in one of their documents, changed the name of a ward in Oakwood from Close to Crescent to try and claim that it was being designed to allow houses to be built on, which it isn't. But they've not really been willing to work with us, as far as I've seen, when we've tried to work with them. So I wondered, Paul, not to put you on the spot too much, but would you be able to outline a little bit about how we've tried to work with Wash as we've managed to work with South Derbyshire and Amber Valley, and what the responses have been to us from Wash?
If we can do that, Paul, first.
I'll try and be brief
Yes,
and
exactly.
polite. Amber Valley and South Derbyshire are part of our housing market area, so we talk to them regularly. Erewash are part of the Nottingham City's housing market area, because they're effectively, they face Nottingham, they don't face towards Derby. Although they are a member of the Derby housing market area in terms of they come and attend meetings because it makes sense to, because of the overlap that you've alluded to. One of the significant constraints that Erewash have is Greenbelt. Their Greenbelt. We were asked at our last of the 2017 local plan examination, we were asked by the inspector, so why have you focused on Amber Valley and South Derbyshire and not asked Erewash? You should be looking east as well. And the answer was because it is Greenbelt and it's much more difficult to allocate housing land in the Greenbelt than it is in non-Greenbelt sites, Amber Valley and South Derbyshire. Same answer this time round, that Erewash are looking to accommodate their housing growth needs within their borough without impeding too much on Greenbelt. And the sites that we know of, in my terms, effectively rounding off the edges of Spondon and other places so that they don't significantly affect the openness of the Greenbelt, is the polite way of putting it.
So in other words, they look to impact the city boundary rather than their own patch, I think is what they're trying to say there.
If I can just ask one final question on that one, Chair. So with regard to Erewash looking more towards Nottingham and Nottingham's housing area, is that a choice they've made or was that dictated that they had to do that?
Through you, Chair, that was part of when we were setting up these housing market areas, travel to work distances and things like that. And as Councillor Wright said, after local government reorganisation, there's a bigger picture. Erewash are should be part of the Southern Derby allocation or Southern Derby Authority, where we will have a much bigger housing target as a result, but potentially more land to play with. I think Councillor Wright, if I can, Councillor Wright mentioned perhaps we ought to pause this local plan and wait for local government reorganisation. I'd urge caution there, because if I don't hit 2026 and submit this plan, our council plan, to central government, we effectively are giving up and allowing government inspectors to come in and do the plan for us. They will just do it with no say whatsoever from members. They will just do it. And of course, in the interim period, we haven't got a plan, so we're going to be inundated by house builders making planning applications where you might not want to see them, be it Greenbelt, Green Wedge, or other sites. They will make their applications, and we, in a planning committee mode, will have to determine those applications and defend them at appeal if we go down that route. So I would urge caution in not doing a plan. We should do a plan, and we should get it to the inspectorate as soon as we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bonser.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I don't feel that I could support Lucy's recommendation. I think it's a bit of a reality check for us all. You know, it's not just a case of what we want or what would be nice, but I mean, we've heard tonight about the immense cost of the homelessness issue to the city, and what the housing needs of the city are, and agreeing to some sort of sequential approach. I just think life doesn't work like that, and developers and developments don't operate like that. It's a matter of what's going to be brought forward, and we're already looking at an allocation of more than 5,000 new houses to the city centre, and to say that the only way is up would be an understatement. You know, I mean, that seems to be the direction of travel. I can't agree to this amendment.
That's fair enough. I mean, as a counterpoint, really, I mean, I wasn't going to mention it, but I've sort of been prompted to, really. I mean, I will be making a full submission along with many other councillors and residents. But as a sort of a balance to that argument, if you take the south of Mickletoe, obviously my ward, Mickletoe ward, the South Derbyshire local plan, which is in Reg 19, identifies 2,500 houses directly to the south of Mickletoe, and that's on top of the huge housing growth that we've seen over the last decade. This local plan, Derby City's local plan, takes that into consideration, but that there's an element of this, and it goes back to the green belt. No, not the green belt. Green spaces in the Hollow, for example. The proposal is to release most of that land for potential housing. Now, that's apparently as a result of South Derbyshire's nearby development. Well, I would say that it's almost more important to actually protect that land, given that there's potentially going to be, via South Derbyshire, should it be adopted, a huge growth in that area. So, you know, it's about balance, really. I understand there's a need for housing, but I also understand the need to create those green buffers and retain those green buffers, especially when you look at a wider picture where housing is being delivered via our local authority neighbours on our behalf, and there's obviously a lot of debate within that. So anyway, it's just a counterpoint. I take your point, but also I absolutely take, because I've got a local context of the recommendation from Councillor Kerr that would look to protect our green spaces. Councillor Rawson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I can't support Councillor Kerr's proposal either. I think the plan is pretty much as sequential as it can be already, and we have gone a long way in terms of, we've already gone through that process of looking at brownfield sites first, and I think we've probably done better than ever in terms of developing a plan that does exactly that. Nearly half of the housing allocation that we're putting forward is city centre based and therefore likely to be brownfield. So I think we've done an excellent job in already encapsulating the comments that were made by the public in that consultation and embedding them in this local plan. So as Paul said, the brownfield sites are difficult to bring forward. There's a reason why developers prefer greenfield sites, and that's because they're cheaper and you can just get on and do it. There's no remedial work that's required, and brownfield sites require, in many cases, public subsidy and funding in order to make them viable. And there's obviously a process of going through, applying for the funding and developing all of that up, which, again, we've been really successful in doing in Derby and Castle Ward, being an example of that. So I actually think it's already, the plan as we have it is already meeting a lot of what Councillor Kerr's asking for in that way. Just to come to the defence of some of our neighbouring authorities, they do often get the brunt of criticism, but we have to remember that to a large extent, because we're built up to our boundaries, we're exporting our housing needs to all of our neighbouring authorities and then blaming them when they actually deliver on our housing needs. So just to put that on record as well.
But don't get me started, Councillor Rawson, because there are two edges to that. Because just to say, I won't spend long, but just to say that I accept that, but there is a strong argument to say building green space, building a buffer and make it sustainable. And I'll say sustainable and give you an example, not necessarily about design, just bolting it on. I call them lazy bolt-ons, and I've seen many of them in my ward, and the impact of those. It'd be far better to actually allow a bit of breathing space. It can still be city provision, if you like, but it builds in some green space and breathing space, and more importantly, the infrastructure to support those developments. So, touche, really. But on the matter of sustainable development, I think I've made this comment before, Paul, about the last local plan, and my disappointment about when it talks about sustainable development, it talks about the delivery of infrastructure within housing growth. And we all agree with that, and common sense development. When we're in the planning committee, kind of crossing our hat and putting different hats on here, when we're in the planning committee, if we cast our minds back, and Councillor Bolton, you may have actually considered this one, I can't quite recall, but Hackwood, north of Micklover, some of it was in South Derbyshire and the bulk was actually in Derby City. Now, the planning application headline was ex-housing at Hackwood and district centre, shops and surgery and school. Now, the school, yeah, was delivered, tick. However, the district centre was never delivered and the surgery, GP surgery provision was never delivered. But however, they were in the planning documents, it had it, where there were going to be rough idea of the mix and all those other things. But in reality, those things didn't get delivered in the end. And that kind of makes a mockery of the whole local plan process that presents this sustainable way forward for us to build developments that have the right infrastructure, that can wash their own face, that have all the positives that we want to deliver, but in reality, I find that the local plans actually fail in that mission.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a great opportunity for us to, assuming a site gets allocated, to say exactly what we want in policy terms, in the plan. What do we need to make that site sustainable? Be it a school, be it shopping facilities. Don't just show us on the plan that gets approved at planning committee. You deliver them, because if it's in the policy, I can condition it. I can do a section 106 to require payment, because at the end of the day, house builders build houses. They'll build a school because it benefits the residents. But they also need doctors to come to the doctor's surgery. They're not going to build it unless they get somebody to come. They're not going to build the shops until they've got somebody who's going to operate the shops from there. So it's having that set at the outset, this local plan in policy, and following that through. And almost, it's very similar to Heatherton. Heatherton has got a parade of shops, it's got the pub, it's got the doctor's surgery. It's taken a long time to get those and to get more facilities provided, but the house builders have come and gone. And the house builders only build houses until there's a quantum of residents there, and then the shops will come. And it's having that, I guess, that policy backing and that conviction that, irrespective of the house builder coming back to us after 5 years saying, nobody's interested in these shops here, we want to build houses on here. No is the answer. Policy says you should provide it. You're expected to provide it. That is the requirement from the local authority. And I guess on that point, we are talking with South Derbyshire on the South Pastures Hospital site, with 2,500 houses, master planning it, because I want it to consume its own smoke. I want it to be school facilities, employment uses, so that it is sustainable, as opposed to a development which is all housing and they all come into the city, because that will do nothing for transport infrastructure. So I have a meeting with one of their landowners next week about how they're going to talk to us and what they're going to deliver on, because some of the fields are ours in Derby City. How are they going to make sure that they match with what's being provided and what's being master planned in South Derbyshire? And that's key. And that's where we work really well with Amber Valley and South Derbyshire, master planning the sites.
Okay, so I mean, obviously I don't want to turn this into a prolonged planning meeting, but I'll try and go back to, before I move on to the recommendation, just to get that clear then. I need to spend more time obviously looking at this plan. I'm going to really dive deep into it. But you talk about policy. Wasn't that what we had in the previous local plan? And what are you saying is going to be different here to give me that confidence that we are going to deliver those things to have sustainable development wherever it is in the city, especially in the larger developments, that they are going to deliver what we need of infrastructure, because I think we've kind of failed really with the previous local plan. We need to learn the lessons, because there's a lot of unsustainable developments that are having a negative impact on many communities now across the city, especially the urban extensions, if you like. And I'm not just talking about my area, there are other areas as well, such as Chellaston, some areas of Littleover as well. So what do you mean, Paul, just quickly, on how is this local plan going to set that policy that it didn't in the previous one?
I would love to see each site allocation master planned so that we know what can be accommodated on site and what is then in policy terms, you shall provide. This site shall accommodate 400 houses, bullet point, a school, next bullet point, shopping facilities of X floor space in relation to the master plans. We work with the developers to provide all those on-site facilities. And so we all have comfort that that's going to be developed, as opposed to us saying, approving a planning application and saying, there's your planning permission, get on with it. We need to be taking them on that journey with us.
All right, enough about that for now then. Clearly I need to discuss this further, and I think Councillor Kerr and others will probably be very keen to do so as well. I need to learn a lot more about that, because words and actual reality can be very different in this area. I'm going to be pragmatic, because if you remember when we started the meeting, I said that the last three recommendations were rejected by Cabinet, which is their right. They can note them, they can reject them, they can partially agree to them, whatever they like. They're the Cabinet, they're the executive, this council. So based on that, I take on board what everybody's said. I think it's a positive thing to bring it forward for a vote. If it doesn't go through to Cabinet, so be it. If it does, then they can decide whether they want to take it on board or not. So I think we have a seconder for that. So if we can have a vote on Councillor Kerr's recommendations, all those in favour? Well, that's 4 in favour. Any against? 3. So that's going to go through to Cabinet. Councillor Kerr, I'm not confident, but we'll see what they say. It'd be interesting to see what their reaction is to that, and we'll see in due course. Are there any other comments on the local plan? Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just firstly want to say that I think it would be very unprofessional if we didn't stick to the dates in our local plan, as alluded to by Councillor behind me. I think we've got to ensure that the local plan goes to keep to the time frame and not wait for our local government organisation. I think we have to get it. This is the Bible for all planning committees, as we know, and I think it's most important that we get on with the job. I have briefly read it this afternoon while I've been in the council house. I agree with the city centre extension. Now it's included Agard Street and the railway station quarter. I think that's a good idea. I read the paragraph on Hymos, and I think that's a sensible option. I read the section on children in care and obviously the issues that we have, and it has been added that we need a full management plan. And I think that's a really important piece of detail that we need to explore and then make sure it's in there. But on the whole, I think this is a good way forward, and I look forward to the consultation period early next year.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Very positive contribution. On the issue of whether you like the plan, you dislike the plan, indifferent, the issue is, for me, is I do accept that we need to have a plan in place, and so it is very important to, once we've started the process, that it is carried through. And one of the reasons why I get concerned when the local plan draft comes forward, and I've seen at least one. I'm not sure I've seen the one before that or not. Can't quite recall. It might even not be called the local plan, whatever it was. Once you let developers know, that the preferred sites, whether they come forward or otherwise, they're published now, so they will be looking at that. They'll have seen it already. So as it moves towards consultation, I would not be surprised, and Councillor Bolton probably wouldn't be either, that we see between now and Reg 19 applications come forward. And I think I remember in several applications in the past with regards to this, the local plan draft, where developers have come forward and said, it's in your local plan draft. So we don't really have to wait. You know, the expectation is that it is going to be adopted, and so we're bringing it forward, and we want to move forward on delivering your much needed housing supply. So it's a double-edged sword, and you're right, Councillor Bolton, once the gun's fired, we've got to get on with it. But obviously we need to make sure that it's the right plan and take on board every bit of consultation, listen to everybody, and I will, like I say, along with a lot of other people, putting in very detailed suggestions for improvement, shall I say. Okay, any more contributions? Councillor Rawson.
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Chair. And to build on your point about the importance of making sure that infrastructure and the facilities that are promised actually come through to fruition, and I think that's probably something that many of us will be looking at the plan and trying to strengthen. But it also translates through into the issue of whole sites coming forward, and looking in, there's at least 2 sites in the new local plan that I can remember being in the last one, which is Brook Farm being one, and the area of land down at Ricknord Road being the other. And it's just from a member of public's point of view, it must be difficult for them to understand why in a local plan, when we've got sites allocated and they're not being delivered, and then another planning application comes through during the course of the plan, there's somewhere that's not mentioned anywhere, and the site at Spondon might fall into that category during the course of the last one. And it must just be difficult for members of public to understand why we've got a local plan, we've got all our sites allocated, some aren't delivered, and then some come left field and do go through. So I guess the question is, what can we do to sort of strengthen and to make sure that once we've got the sites that we all agree are the most suitable, that they do come through and are delivered, to protect us in a way from applications from other sites that are perhaps less suitable.
Thank you. So, Paul, I think we're blaming you for all of that, so I don't know what your response is.
That's absolutely fine, thick-skinned. When we got to a stage where all the sites that we want to allocate are been agreed, before we go off to the planning inspector, I'll be seeking assurances from those landowners and or developers that you're going to bring your site forward, and when. We did that last time, because the inspector is going to be sitting where you are, Chair, and asking that very question. How have I got comfort that those sites will be brought forward? Well, because here's the suite of evidence that the developers, and if they turn up on the day, they can say they're going to be bringing those sites forward to meet our numbers. What I don't want is another developer of another site that hasn't got an allocation coming forward and saying, well, I can deliver my site, and they can't deliver theirs. And that's what happened at Amber Valley. They can't deliver their site, but I can bring mine forward. And it's about convincing the inspector. So I need a suite of letters, or even in person, the developers coming forward with the sites that we've chosen to saying, yes, we can bring those forward. It may change their minds later on down the line, Brook Farm, but at this stage, I just need the comfort that they are going to be up for the challenges.
I'm not quite sure you've answered the question, but I think Councillor Rawson's point, which I totally agree with, is, I mean, the first local plan, I remember us standing in various public meetings trying to explain to residents about the things that we didn't agree with and the sites we didn't agree with. But the point was made that regardless of that, if the council defines or a local authority defines preferred housing sites, I mean preferred in quotes because they're not necessarily preferred for everybody, and we've heard that there's going to be comments on that as we move forward about the sites that are in this draft plan. There is a lot of consternation when the protection that you assume on non-preferred sites is hard to justify sometimes and hard to refer to as defence of that particular site that isn't in the plan. Developers will come forward and say, well, it's not in the plan, but we still think it's viable for this reason and this reason. We're going to test the system, and if you reject it, we're going to take it to appeal. You know, it does seem to be sometimes a bit of a developer's charter, and I totally agree with Councillor Rawson that sometimes it's hard to understand where we've done all the work, whether you agree with the sites or otherwise. Once they're adopted, then you know you should have a high level of confidence that sites that aren't within that remit are much harder for developers to bring forward housing proposals for.
Very quickly then, I agree entirely. Once we've got a 5-year supply, local plans adopted, we've got a 5-year supply of housing, anybody coming forward with a site that's not allocated in the plan should not be getting an approval. We've got a most up-to-date Green Wedge, Green Belt review. That's our evidence base, published in September. That's our evidence base. They've got no wriggle room again to undermine the principles established in the plan. The difficulty is in their court justifying at appeal why their site should be developed contrary to the plan. And that's why we need a plan.
That's a stronger reply, Paul. I think that's more in line with what we were looking for, to be honest with you. Okay, thank you very much anyway for your overview, and we'll see. We assume that Cabinet will press forward for the reasons Councillor Bolton has mentioned, and we'll have to ensure that we know everybody, let everybody know to take part in the consultation when it's launched in a few weeks' time, really. Okay, thank you, Paul. Moving on then to item 12, it's the last item of the evening on the Cabinet agenda, and it's 25-26 Q2 performance monitoring, which has got all the fancy, and in my document, the coloured, which is key, elements of all the directions of travel. So over to you just to give us an overview.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah Olive, Corporate Performance Lead. So this item is a regular report linked to the Council Delivery Plan for 25-26. For noting, it covers Q2 performance linked to performance measures, objectives, priority projects and strategic risk, covering the period of June 25 to September 25. I would highlight that the Q2 performance has been notably strong, and I'd like to draw your attention to some of the key highlights. There are further details presented within paragraph 4.4, but there is the full appendix 1, which details everything within the plan, with a supporting commentary provided by accountable officers as well. So just to summarise some of the highlights for Q2, 63% of children in care were placed within 20 miles of their original address, and that is our strongest performance for several years, which is extremely positive. And in addition, and related, is 45% of active foster placements for children in care were provided by Derby City Fostering Services, which again is one of our highest performances in several years. 100% of our education, health and care plans were issued within the 20-week timescale for the last quarter, so consistently every month for the last quarter. And a backlog has been worked through over the year, and this is a tremendous achievement because we're now actually meeting our internal target that we've set. So the kind of service areas really turned that round. In addition, 102 jobs have been created within Q2 or safeguarded following some support or intervention from the council, and 34 job vacancies were filled following business and organisational support from the council as well. As I said, there's more details within the report, but I think those are a few highlights that are worth pulling out. Just to summarise the actual performance elements of the report. Related to metrics, at the end of September, 64.5% of those that had an agreed target actually met or exceeded that target, and that is an improvement on the same period last year. Similarly, 34 measures that had a comparable direction of travel, so when we compare the Q2 performance of this year compared to Q2 performance last year, 55.9% of those had an improved direction of travel, which again is an improvement on Q2 last year. The report outlines the detail with further information in there. In regards to objectives, the delivery plan objectives that we've set, At the end of Q2, 94% of those objectives have either been completed or are on track to complete within the target timescale. 3 of our objectives have actually completed within Q2, and the details are in there. 1 linked to a refresh of the sufficiency strategy, linked to children's placements. 1 linked to developing the reuse provision within waste services. So that's linked to the reuse Rainsway shop, which opened in August. And the destination management plan linked to our local visitor economy was completed as well. 2 objectives are showing us some slippage in Q2. These are delivering our air quality action plan, which previously was reported as on track. Progress does continue, but the change in status has been noted due to loss of some additional officer capacity following the ending of funding, and work continues to identify alternative sources of that funding. And secondly, refreshing the landlord's charter. At the time of the Q2 report was compiled, the Renters' Rights Bill was still awaiting royal assent. Towards the end of October, that legislation did actually receive royal assent, so we can now progress with that objective, take that forward within Q3. Finally, there is 1 objective reporting as major slippage, which has been reported as major slippage this year, throughout the quarters this year, and this is linked to embedding the council constitution. And I think the kind of main narrative around that is with LGR, the local government reorganisation has become that main focus related to that. It's worth noting, just to pull out in paragraph 4.6, whilst there's no areas recommended for a performance surgery, there is 1 performance measure that's highlighted as an area that CLT we're going to look at in more detail, which is the households with dependent children in temporary accommodation for longer than 6 months. That obviously links to the earlier agenda item that Neil presented, and performance is very reflective of the national climate, but it just shows that the demand and supply of affordable social housing. Moving on to priority projects. So there are 28 projects in the council delivery plan at the moment. There have been no new projects brought forward in Q2, and 82% of the projects in Q2 were given a status of either green or green amber. Finally, just in regards to the strategic risks that we monitor as part of the delivery plan, there are 19 of those in total. No new strategic risks have appeared in Q2, so nothing's been escalated. And in addition, there's been no changes to any of the statuses from our strategic risks between Q1 and Q2. As I said, the full overview is in the very detailed appendix, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I mean, overall it's a very positive report, and certainly the highlights you brought out at the start about placements and ECHPs being completed in targets, all welcome. But there are some real issues within the performance report, and I feel as though we, quite rightly, we focus on the success because we want to promote those. But we've also got responsibility to manage those areas we're not performing so well in. So if you take the crime performance in the last quarter, hate crime, overall crime, I've got 2 issues really. One, it doesn't reflect, for example, overall crime. We've had a lot of public discussion and debate about this, and the overall picture that's been promoted, everything's safe, no problem, it's just public perception. The figures don't reflect that. We've had an increase in crime. So that's the first issue, that when we should be offering solutions. Now, and I understand this, you've got to rely on whoever provides you with the update for this, but if you take the narrative around overall crime, for example, it blames on the reason the increase is it blamed on the community safety team having cuts in funding and not being able to deliver diversionary or prevention activity. And while they absolutely have an impact on individual crime levels, they're not a panacea for an explanation of why crimes raise. So, for example, the sex-related crime, you know, there are prevention issues and diversionary issues, but because of the motivation of sex-related crime, it's very unsure whether they have any impact whatsoever. So my point in there is it's a very, very unsophisticated response to a change, and quite a significant change, when, you know, we're actually saying things are becoming safer. And that goes for the number of, so for antisocial behaviour, yeah, it's good news that antisocial behaviour incidents across the city have reduced, but I've got no doubt that, you know, in parts of the city they haven't done that. But the response in terms of dealing with it is all more resources focused on the city centre. So again, I don't think it's my view is, and we've already referred this to the community safety scrutiny panel to look at in more depth. But for me, it's more evidence. And the real lazy one, I think, is the hate crime one. It actually reduced last quarter, and the explanation was, well, global events raise it. It's gone up this quarter, and we've used the same explanation. And for me, it's either people don't understand or are not taking interest in terms of understanding the cause for these things, and they're just trotting out. You know, somebody's had a look at that and thought, we can't really explain it, so we'll just put in the last... Now, that might be unkind and unfair or emphasised to make a point, but these are real issues. Behind every one of these is a victim. You know, so it's really important that we do that service to them to actually understand this and take the time to actually provide proper responses. So, you know, I haven't got a recommendation. I would hope that Cabinet would take this seriously and actually look at the impact of rising crime levels across Derby. But I do recognise that it's one quarter, you know, and from a crime analyst perspective, you don't look at the previous quarter, because it might be wholly seasonal issues, or it might just be completely random variation. So basically, what I'm saying with crime in particular, where around the educational and health plan, there's somebody behind that needs support, but it's the same for crime. It's not a good story, but we ought to be given the same attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
As wanting again to pick up a particular item, but to pick it up as part of the principle about how this is used. I was looking at RSO3, which is contribute to the delivery of Derby and Derbyshire's childhood obesity strategy, which feels to me to be really important. And it states that during Q2, funding was secured to extend the complications of excess weight pilot for children with severe obesity and diagnosed complications, which it sounds good, but then apparently there are only 100 children per year across the whole Derby, Derbyshire, Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire area. And the problem is that there isn't capacity to let more children join the scheme. Now, I'm reading this here, but I haven't got any indication as to what we are doing about that, or how that need can be met in other ways, or whether we're bidding for more money, or whether we can take the learning from this and roll it out in some other way. And I just hope that the learning from here, not just this item, but other items, is being able to be picked up and used in other ways, so that we are benefiting from this analysis of the data.
Okay, fair point. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Because I've got a few, if that's all right. So on page 419, cyber threats. You know, us as an organisation could be crippled by a serious cyber attack. And specific services for the most vulnerable in the city could be impacted, along with just the wider range of day-to-day services as well. So it's a real risk, and it is concerning to see it still high risk on there. Now, I know that there seems to be a direction of travel towards amber, but I would like to put forward a recommendation, and if officers would like to, if you have got something to contribute to this, that's fair enough. But I'm thinking that Cabinet ensure that robust measures are put into place as a matter of urgency to significantly reduce the risk and to report back to exec scrutiny on progress. Now, this is not an attack on Cabinet. I'm just recognising the serious risk that this organisation has on its services if we are attacked and we don't have the full measures in place. It's something which I'm sure is at the top priority of the relevant officers to ensure that we have the defences in place. And I'm not necessarily asking for full details of that to come back. I just need to be given confidence that there is a plan and a little bit more detail, because I am really concerned about it. Councillor Wright, do you have anything to add on that? Would you second that recommendation? Heather.
If I can just come in on that one in particular, this risk hasn't changed in any way. It remains red. So it's assessed as 16, which is the highest possible risk rating. I think on most organisations' risk register, cyber risk would be there. I am also confident that we've got a number of controls in place, but I think Andy Bramall, our Director of Digital, if he was here, would say, you know, that as much as we mitigate, it still remains a really, really significant risk. So there hasn't been any change from previous quarters. The amber arrow just indicates no change, but we just recognise that it is one of our, you know, I think there's 6 risks that are assessed as the kind of the highest priority, and cyber is definitely there. So we are taking it incredibly seriously. If the committee did want any more information on that, I know Andy Bramall would be very keen to hear. I mean, we do provide more information on all of the strategic risks to Audit and Governance Committee on a 6-monthly basis. So again, what they do is they get, you know, we provide more information about the controls and the mitigating actions that are being taken, you know, against all of our strategic risks. So if I can just reassure Executive Scrutiny Board that we do have plans in place, essentially. Thank you.
Okay, well, okay, I'll amend that recommendation slightly then. If I can put forward, and then look for a seconder again for it, the Cabinet ensure that robust measures continue to be put into place to aim to significantly reduce the risk and report back to exec scrutiny on progress. I would like to dip into that, and I think that's a mechanism there to hopefully have some positive dialogue, even if it necessarily needs to be in a confidential discussion if there's sort of sensitive information there that we need to learn about. I know that there'll be an overview scrutiny board that will look at that, but I think it's something which we'll probably dip into rather than just accepting that there is a severe risk, and I think that's not going to change whatever measures are put into place, but I just need some confidence. If I can have a seconder for that and have a vote on it. Councillor Kerr.
Chair, rather than saying reduce the risk, because I think the risk is out there, we can't reduce it in Derby, it's global, but to mitigate. Thank you.
Sorry, just comments on two other things. Page 420, when we talk about the East Midlands Combined Authority. So this is my opinion. It may or may not be shared, but I believe that highways officers of the council kind of pivoted already towards the Combined Authority, and the discussions that I've had, and I'm sure you have too, about strategic plans for a local area that will go to Combined Authority for consideration of funding bids, and the Mayor will decide, and all of this kind of thing, which it is what it is. I get that, whether you agree with it or not, but it seems very premature and also unfair for us to have to really struggle to have any kind of small mitigations and small schemes delivered at a local area. And I notice, my point is, that it's taken so long for the combined authorities to find its feet. You know, I think there is something there for officers just to understand that it is going to take, for whatever reason, it's going to take even longer for the combined authority to perform effectively, probably even to the second term of whoever gets elected to mayor next time, to be honest with you. And in the meantime, we seem to be almost like, well, the combined authority exists now, so we're just shoving everything that way, and yet it isn't set up properly, so it's not delivering. You know, so it's a comment, it's not any recommendation, it's just a frustration that this recognises that the combined authority has a lot of work to do, and yet we seem to be almost relying on it to deliver things that it can't possibly deliver right now. So, anyway, rant over and point made, I think. And then finally on page 425, I think the recycling side of things is still a concern, but it's going to be interesting to see how things pan out next year with the new food service. It's something we need to keep an eye on, because we used to be probably the top city in the country, didn't we? And I think we've lost that somewhere along the way. So I think it is something that we need to not just accept as red, actually work hard to actually bring that into green and have ambitious targets as well. But I think we just need to see how the new service is going to be rolled out and how effective that is in, is it March or April? I can't remember now. Something like that. Okay, any more? Sorry, Heather.
Sorry, can I just come back on a couple of the points? Sorry, I wasn't sure whether
Sorry.
we were going to take all of the kind of comments and questions. Just with respect to Councillor John Wright, I hope you would agree that this is a balanced performance report. What we do and what the performance team do is put an awful lot of time and effort into reporting against the council delivery plan, major projects, you know, performance measures and risks in a transparent way. So I hope you would agree that the report is balanced. With respect to your comments around the community safety indicators, I think it is absolutely right to point this towards the Community Safety Partnership and the relevant scrutiny board, because they are fully entitled to be able to kind of look into those. I think, as Sarah described earlier, we do, you know, we measure performance in many different ways. It can be against target, it can be direction of travel. Now, if we look at the community safety indicators for this particular quarter, and again, I mean, you made the point that what we look at is trends over several quarters. We don't necessarily just react to one quarter's performance. So I think that's something to say. But in terms of overall crimes in the city, whilst they have gone up, they are still within tolerance, so within target. So, you know, whilst you're absolutely right, and I'm really pleased, to be honest, that members are looking at the detail here and the narratives that sit behind it, because, you know, it is the role of exec scrutiny to do that and to scrutinise the performance. That is, in a way, why that hasn't hit our radar or featured in the performance report. Now, clearly, if we see trends going forward into quarter three, now that is something that we may well pick up on. But certainly, you know, the relevant scrutiny board is fully entitled to do that. Is that okay on that point?
Councillor Wright?
Yeah, I take all those points. My major concern was the narrative that associated with those. Yeah, sorry, my major issue was the narrative that's associated with those performance indicators. And, you know, if you look back at the last quarter report, for example, something like hate crime, 1 month it's gone in one direction, the other month's gone in the other direction, yet the narrative is exactly the same. Now, it may be that there's a legitimate reason behind that, but I suspect there isn't. You know, it's more sophisticated than that. And I suppose my real concern, and I was directing it, is that have we got a crime analyst that looks at how we look at crime statistics across the city? Because there seems to be a whole host of issues in relation to what we're measuring, the period of time, the cause, you know, whether they're within significant range. There's a whole host of issues, and it just seems on the surface not very sophisticated, whereas out there's a whole science around crime analysis and you know, and associated you know, criminology, for example.
I'm not an expert in this area, so I can just admit that straight away. But I mean, my understanding is that these figures are derived from the police. We do have some some really good analyst knowledge actually from a community safety point of view, and obviously we work with colleagues at the police and other partners to interpret the data. And I know that that forms the basis of information which is presented to the Community Safety Partnership, the Safer Derby Board. So, I clearly hate crime is a really, is something that is very important, particularly currently, and certainly one that we are keeping an eye on. And I know that the Safer Derby Board are also doing extensive work on this. So I think there probably is a lot more, that would tell the picture beyond the commentary that's included, in our report. So, I mean, as I mentioned, if the relevant scrutiny board is interested in that, we're happy to do that, and bring more information to you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much all for your positive contributions. I'll close the meeting there. Thank you very much.